She was 22 and completely alone. Not the dramatic kind of alone people notice, the quieter kind, the kind that follows you into grocery stores when you count coins too slowly, the kind that sits beside you on bus rides, the kind that makes winter feel colder. For nearly 2 months, Nora Whitmore had been sleeping inside an abandoned train waiting room wrapped in an old army blanket she found near a donation bin. Every morning she folded it carefully before sunrise so security guards wouldn't throw it away. She owned 2 sweaters, one cracked phone, and a leather satchel that used to belong to her grandfather. That was it. 3 weeks earlier, the nursing home where she worked closed suddenly after bankruptcy investigations employees arrived one morning to lock doors and handwritten notices taped to the windows. No final paychecks. No warning. Just silence. Then came the eviction. Then the phone calls. Nobody answered anymore. Until one rainy afternoon, Nora found an old county auction listing at the public library, abandoned apothecary building. 1. The photograph showed a frozen brick shop buried in snow at the edge of a mountain town. Broken windows, collapsed chimney medicine shelves still visible through dusty glass. Nobody wanted it. Nobody even bid against her. So Nora spent her last dollar. And 4 days later she stood outside the abandoned apothecary, holding rusted keys in shaking hands. But what she didn't know was behind the old medicine wall, someone had hidden a secret that had been waiting decades to be uncovered. And the deeper Nora searched, the stranger the frozen apothecary became. Before we continue, if stories like this stay with you, stories about forgotten places, hidden legacies, and people trying to rebuild themselves, after losing everything, subscribe and stay until the end, because sometimes the coldest places hide the warmest truths. Nora's grandfather smelled like peppermint oil and old paper. Even his coats carried the scent. His name was Elias Whitmore. For nearly 50 years he worked as a pharmacist in a tiny independent apothecary 2 towns away from where Nora grew up. Not a modern pharmacy. An old-fashioned one-wood drawers labeled in fading gold letters, glass bottles filled with herbs, mortars, and pestles, worn smooth by time. Children came there for cough syrup and left with peppermint candies wrapped in wax paper. Elias knew everyone's name, everyone's illnesses, everyone's grief. As a child, Nora spent weekends sitting on a stool behind the counter, while snow piled against the windows outside. The apothecary was always warm. Radiators hissed softly beneath the shelves. Tiny brass bells jingled every time customers entered, and somewhere in the back room water simmered gently inside copper kettles. Her grandfather taught her things nobody else cared about anymore: how to grind dried lavender properly, how wintergreen smelled different after rain, how handwritten labels mattered because people trust care. They can see everything with him felt patient, quiet, intentional. Sometimes customers couldn't afford medicine. Elias helped them anyway. People remember kindness longer than prices, he used to whisper. Nora believed him because even after hard years, people still brought him homemade pies during holidays, still waved at him from passing trucks, still trusted him, and secretly Nora wanted a life like that someday. Simple, useful, warm. But warmth disappeared slowly after her grandmother died. Elias stopped singing while he worked. The radio stayed off longer. Dust gathered faster in corners, and eventually large chain pharmacies arrived nearby offering cheaper prices. Customers disappeared little by little. Not suddenly. That was the painful part. Slow losses hurt differently. Every month another shelf emptied, another unpaid bill arrived. Still Elias refused to close the apothecary. Even during snowstorms he unlocked the doors before sunrise. Even after arthritis twisted his fingers. You don't abandon people just because times get hard, he told Nora once while sorting herbs late at night. But life abandoned him anyway. When Nora turned 16, Elias suffered a stroke inside the back storage room. She found him collapsed beside shelves of winter tinctures. After the funeral, creditors stripped the apothecary almost bare. Most of the old bottles vanished. The hand-painted sign disappeared. Even the brass register got sold. Nora tried saving what she could, mostly small things. Her grandfather's leather satchel, a rusted set of measuring spoons, One handwritten recipe book stained with tea rings and dried herbs. Then adulthood arrived hard and fast. Her mother moved away with a new husband. College became impossible. Bills replaced dreams. Nora spent years working exhausting jobs just to survive, and somewhere along the way, she stopped imagining a future entirely until the frozen apothecary appeared on that library computer screen, and something inside her stirred again. Not hope exactly, just recognition. The mountain town of Black Hollow barely existed anymore. Old mining roads cut through frozen. Hillsides, snow-covered abandoned storefronts half the year, people left decades earlier searching for work elsewhere. The apothecary sat at the far edge of town near a frozen river. Locals called it Hollow Creek Remedies. Once, Nora discovered that from old newspaper clippings during the bus ride north. One article mentioned the owner briefly, Margaret Vale, a widow who operated the shop alone for 30 years before disappearing mysteriously during winter in 1984. No body found. No explanation. The building simply closed overnight. That detail stayed with Nora strangely, because her grandfather once mentioned Margaret Vale during a snowstorm years ago. She understood medicine better than most doctors, he had said quietly. Nora remembered asking if he knew. Her personally, Elias paused a long time before answering little. Then he changed the subject. At the time she thought nothing of it. Now the memory returned sharply, like a forgotten door reopening. The bus dropped Nora near Black Hollow just before dusk. Snow fell softly through gray skies. The cold there felt different, sharper somehow. The town looked frozen in another decade. Boarded diners, empty sidewalks, faded signs swinging gently in the wind, and at the far end of the street stood the apothecary's small brick building, narrow windows, green paint peeling from the wooden frame, a crooked sign still hanging above the door, Hollow Creek Remedies. Nora stood silently for a long moment. Her breath clouded the air. The rusted key shook slightly in her hand. Then she unlocked the door. The smell hit her first. Dust, old wood, dried herbs, and underneath it, all peppermint. Her chest tightened instantly. The interior remained strangely intact. Shelves still lined the walls. Medicine bottles covered in frost stood untouched behind glass. Cabinets as snowlight filtered softly through dirty windows, and despite years of abandonment, the place didn't feel dead. It felt waiting, like someone expected to return eventually. That frightened Nora more than emptiness would have. The first strange thing happened that night. The sound of soft knocking somewhere behind the walls, 3 taps, pause. Then again, Nora sat upright inside her sleeping bag near the counter. Silence returned immediately afterward. Old pipes, maybe frozen wood settling. That's what she told herself. Still the sound continued every night, always near the back medicine shelves. Tap, tap, tap. The second strange thing was the heat. One section of wall stayed warmer than the rest of the building, impossible in temperatures that cold. Nora pressed her hand against it carefully one morning. Definitely warmer, not hot, just alive somehow. Then came the smell, fresh eucalyptus, faint but unmistakable. Yet every bottle in the shop was decades old. Nothing should still smell fresh there. Nothing should still feel warm. Questions began piling up quietly inside her mind, and with each new detail, leaving became harder. Over the next week, Nora cleaned constantly. She swept broken glass, organized fallen bottles, lit small fires inside the rusted stove, and slowly pieces of the apothecary revealed themselves. Old prescription ledgers remained hidden beneath collapsed shelves. Handwritten customer notes filled drawers. One cabinet contained herbal mixtures dated only months before Margaret Vale vanished, but one discovery unsettled Nora deeply. Inside a back office desk, she found a photograph. Her grandfather, standing beside Margaret Vale outside the apothecary, both smiling, both younger, and on the back, handwritten in faded ink for Elias, in case the wall is ever needed again. Nora stared at those words for a very long time. The wall. What wall? Suddenly the nightly tapping felt less accidental. A local mechanic named Owen occasionally checked on Nora after hearing someone moved into the old building. You staying there alone? He asked one snowy afternoon. For now, he looked uncomfortable. People avoid that place. Why? Owen hesitated, then finally answered quietly. Margaret Vale hid things. What kind of things? No one knows. That answer only deepened the mystery. Later that night, Nora examined the warm wall carefully with lantern light. The medicine shelves covering it looked slightly uneven. Tiny scrape marks appeared near the floorboards, and one shelf didn't sit. Flush against the brick, her pulse quickened. Slowly she removed dusty bottles one by one. The shelf moved slightly when pushed, not built into the wall, attached hidden intentionally. The tapping sound came again behind her. Louder this time. Tap, tap, tap. Nora froze completely. Then silence. For one terrifying second she wondered if someone else was inside the building, but deep down she already knew. The sound wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from behind the wall. The hidden shelf took nearly 2 hours to move. Rusted hinges resisted every inch. Dust exploded into the air. Behind it stood another wall section covered in cracked plaster, and at its center a tiny brass lock. Nora's breathing slowed immediately because hanging inside her grandfather's old satchel, for years unnoticed, was a small brass key. She retrieved it carefully. Her hands trembled violently. The key fit perfectly. The lock clicked softly. Then nothing happened. Nora pushed harder. Part of the wall shifted inward. Cold air drifted outward, carrying the scent of peppermint, eucalyptus, and something metallic underneath. Darkness waited beyond the opening, and somewhere inside, something softly ticked, not mechanical dripping. Water, maybe, or time itself. Nora stepped forward slowly into the hidden space her grandfather somehow knew existed, and what she found there changed everything. The hidden room stretched beneath the apothecary like a preserved underground workshop. Shelves lined the stone walls filled with rare medicine bottles wrapped carefully in cloth. Dried herbs still hung from ceiling beams. Old lanterns sat untouched beside handwritten journals. At the center stood a heavy wooden table covered with maps, receipts, and sealed envelopes, and beside it 3 locked metal cash boxes. Nora opened the first slowly. Inside were gold coins, silver certificate stacks of preserved cash wrapped in wax paper. The second box contained property deeds and bank documents connected to forgotten mining lands surrounding Black Hollow, land now worth millions after recent mineral discoveries Nora had read about online weeks earlier. But it was the third box that broke her completely. Inside lay dozens of handwritten letters tied together with blue ribbon letters between Margaret Vale and Elias Whitmore. Her grandfather. Nora's hands shook as she opened the first one. They had loved each other quietly for years, but neither abandoned their responsibilities or families. Instead, they remained close through medicine work, helping isolated mountain towns survive harsh winters together. And hidden among the letters sat one final envelope addressed directly to Nora. The handwriting belonged to her grandfather. "If you found this room, then life became difficult enough for you to understand why we built it." Tears blurred her vision immediately. The letter explained everything. During severe winters in the 1960s and 70s, Elias and Margaret secretly stored emergency medicine money and supplies inside the hidden room to help struggling families when mining companies abandoned the town. The hidden wall protected desperate people for decades, and when Margaret realized she was dying, she sealed the room permanently, leaving instructions. Only Elias understood. Near the end of the letter, one final sentence appeared. "You were never meant to inherit money first. You were meant to inherit purpose." Nora cried alone inside that hidden room for a very long time, not because of the valuables, but because after years of drifting through life, she finally understood where she belonged. Restoring Hollow Creek remedies took years, not months, years. The roof collapsed twice during heavy snow. Pipes froze constantly. Half the building needed rebuilding, but Nora stayed. She learned herbal medicine from her grandfather's journals, took business classes online using library computers, made mistakes, lost money, started over again and again. Owen helped repair heating systems. An elderly woman from town donated original medicine bottles she'd saved for decades. Slowly, trust returned to Black Hollow, and eventually so did people. Travelers began visiting the restored apothecary during winter tourism seasons. Nora sold handmade remedies, teas, soaps, and herbal oils using Elias and Margaret's original formulas. Behind the counter sat the old brass key beneath glass. Customers always asked about it. Nora simply smiled softly. It opened the right door eventually. Some inheritances arrive quietly, not as money, not as property, but as unfinished kindness passed carefully from one generation to another. Elias and Margaret understood something most people forget: healing matters, even small healing. A warm room peppermint tea medicine during hard winters. A hidden place, protecting strangers, and maybe people are like abandoned buildings sometimes, cold on the outside, forgotten, but still carrying warmth somewhere deep behind the walls, waiting for someone patient enough to find it. 3 winters later, snow fell softly. Outside the restored apothecary windows, warm amber light glowed across shelves lined with glass bottles and dried herbs. Customers laughed quietly near the tea counter. The old brass bell above the entrance jingled gently as someone entered. And for a moment Nora stood perfectly still, because the sound reminded her of childhood, of Elias, of warmth surviving cold seasons. She looked toward the hidden medicine wall near the back shelves. Most visitors never noticed it. That felt right somehow. Some things aren't meant to be obvious. Some things reveal themselves only when people truly need them. Nora reached into her grandfather's old satchel and touched the worn leather gently. Then she smiled softly to herself, because years earlier she arrived in Black Hollow believing she had bought a frozen abandoned building for $1. But the truth was much deeper than that. She hadn't purchased an apothecary. She had inherited a purpose, and standing there surrounded by warmth herbs and quiet life, Nora finally stopped feeling alone. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more emotional mystery journeys like this one, and in the comments, tell us about a memory, object, or person that still brings you comfort during hard seasons. Sometimes the smallest things keep us warm the longest.